the morning they came. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge when the first engine growled awake beyond the pecan grove. Jack Reddin lifted his coffee mug and watched gray smoke uncoil above the trees. It should have been another quiet morning. Roosters, wind through wire fence, the slow rhythm of a ranch waking up. Instead, the air tasted of diesel. He stepped off the porch boards that his grandfather had nailed down 50 years earlier and followed the noise across dew-wet grass. The ground shook beneath his boots. A yellow backhoe stood in the middle of his orchard, teeth of its bucket sunk into black soil. Men in reflective vests moved with that fast confidence that comes when they think the land already belongs to them. Jack didn't shout right away. He watched. Counting machines, counting trucks. 6 of them. A temporary office trailer already dropped by the gate. They'd planned this. One worker noticed him. "Morning, sir." "You'll want to stay clear. We're cutting the trench line." Jack kept his voice level. "What trench line?" The man gestured with a gloved hand toward orange stakes that zigzagged through the pecan trees. "Drainage pipeline, HOA job." "Approved and permitted." Jack took the laminated permit sheet the man offered. At the bottom, in blue ink, Veronica Lane, President, Ridgemont Homeowners Association. He'd met her once, 3 years earlier, when she'd tried to buy part of his north pasture for a clubhouse parking lot. She'd smiled through him then, too. Now her signature crawled across the paper like a bad tattoo. He folded the sheet. "You're on my deeded property," the worker shrugged. "County permit says right-of-way, sir." "Right-of-way." Jack almost laughed. His grandfather had warned him. When a man with a map shows up saying the law's on his side, check who drew the map. He called the county office from his truck. The clerk on the other end sounded nervous. "Mr. Reddin, the Ridgemont project has full drainage approval. You'd have to file an appeal. How long's that take?" "Maybe 6 months." By then, the pipe would already be in the ground. He drove back toward the site, parked in the shadow of the equipment trailer. A woman in tailored jeans and a white hard hat stood there, giving orders to the crew. Veronica Lane. Same designer sunglasses, same look that made people apologize before they'd done anything wrong. She turned when he approached. "Mr. Reddin!" "Glad you're here. We were about to leave a note on your gate." "You're trespassing." She smiled like that word was quaint. The county classified this as public drainage infrastructure. "You'll be compensated. How much?" $7,500. "The check's ready once the trench crosses your fence." Jack looked down the row of trees, each one planted by his grandfather after coming home from Korea. He said quietly, "You're cutting through 40 years of roots for a golf course runoff pipe." Veronica tipped her glasses. "It's called progress." "You can't stop progress," he could have yelled. Instead, he walked away, boots grinding in the soil. He'd learned long ago that the quiet man in a fight usually wins it. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table with his wife, Sarah. The smell of fried catfish hung in the air. "Rufus, their old shepherd, snored underfoot. They started it?" she asked. "They started it. You call Buck?" "Meaning County Commissioner Buck Hollister, their oldest friend. Voicemail." "I'll go see him tomorrow." Sarah placed her hand on his. "Don't let this eat you alive." Jack gave a thin smile. "I won't. I just need to know who signed that permit." Outside, floodlights flickered in the orchard. The machines hadn't stopped. They were working through the night. The next day, Buck met him at the courthouse cafe, coffee in one hand, county map rolled in the other. "I looked into it," Buck said. "The permit slid through 2 weeks ago under public necessity." Veronica pushed it hard. "County attorney rubber-stamped it." "She paid him?" Buck's eyes said he didn't need to answer. "Any way to reverse it?" "Not without lawyers, Jack, and lawyers cost." Jack nodded slowly. He wasn't beaten. He was thinking. Flashback. That afternoon, he drove the fence lines, mind turning back 15 years, to the drought that nearly killed the ranch. Back then, wells went dry, creeks cracked, and he'd gambled everything on a rusted utility nobody wanted, Iron Creek Water Co. He'd bought it under a holding company, kept his name off the records. It served 12 towns now, steady and quiet income. People thought he was just a rancher. Nobody knew he also owned the water beneath their lawns. He stopped the truck beside the creek. Water slid past, brown from last night's digging. He crouched, filled his palm, smelled diesel. That was the moment anger turned into intention. 2 days later, the pipeline trench cut across his pasture like a scar. When the foreman handed him the easement contract, Jack read every line. Clause 9. Landowner waives right to further compensation once easement recorded. He signed anyway, then photographed every page, every stake, every timestamp. His grandfather's voice echoed, "Pick your battles." But when you pick one, end it. Veronica handed him the check. "Try to use it fixing that old barn," she said. Jack folded it neatly into his pocket. "Appreciate your concern." That night he stood under the floodlights watching dirt pour back over steel. Sarah joined him with 2 beers. "It's just drainage, honey. Let it go." He nodded without looking away. "I will. In my own way." 1 week later, the cattle stopped drinking. They stood 10 feet from the creek, lowing nervously. Even the bees avoided the bank. Jack filled a sample jar, drove to the county extension office. The technician frowned at the results. High pH, fuel traces, fertilizer residue. "This water's been hit with runoff," he said. "You got new construction upstream?" Jack smiled thinly. "You could say that." He drove straight to the Ridgemont clubhouse, marble floors. Air conditioning cold enough to see his breath. Veronica behind glass desk, a painting of rolling green fairways behind her. He laid the report down. "Your pipe's leaking poison. Our engineer certified compliance. I want remediation." She tilted her head. "Maybe your herd's overgrazing, stirring up sediment?" Jack exhaled slowly. "Do the right thing." She stood, hands clasped. "Ridgemont represents $120 million in property value. Your ranch, maybe $800,000. The county agrees our needs outweigh yours. If you don't like it, sue us." He walked out before she saw his smile, because she'd just given him the reason and the legal opening he needed. Jack spent that night at the kitchen table surrounded by maps and contracts. He texted Darnell, Iron Creek's general manager, "Pull Ridgemont files." 30 minutes later, a PDF arrived. He scrolled until his eyes caught the fine print. Clause 7B. Rate increase up to 300% for contamination of watershed. Clause 9C. Provider may suspend or terminate service for breach of environmental compliance. Jack leaned back, the weight of the plan forming clear as sunrise. Veronica thought water was just something that came out of a faucet. She'd forgotten someone controlled the source. That night, as thunder rolled across the valley, Jack wrote 3 words on a notepad: document, prove, end. Then he turned off the porch light. The machines had gone silent for the first time in a week. He knew that meant only one thing. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The Poison Creek. The first real rain came 3 days later. At dawn, the sky was an iron sheet, thunder crawling somewhere beyond the hills. By noon, the creek was a moving mirror again, but not clean. It carried a film, thin and rainbow slick, twisting colors that didn't belong in nature. Jack stood in his slicker, watching drops hit his hat brim. He remembered storms as a boy, how the smell of wet earth had once meant life. Now it smelled of chemicals and something bitter. Rufus sniffed the water, growled once, and backed away. He took another sample. He'd been doing that every few days since the pipeline opened. Methodical, labeled jars lined up in an old refrigerator in the barn. Every jar looked darker than the last. That night, Sarah came in, wiping her hands on a towel. "Dinner's on the stove," she said, then saw the samples. "You're turning the barn into a lab now?" Jack half smiled. "Evidence locker? Evidence for what?" "For what's coming." She shook her head, worry soft in her eyes. "You always think you can fix everything alone." He didn't answer. Because she was right. But that wasn't the point. The letter week later, a letter arrived, cream envelope, HOA seal embossed. Inside, a polite threat dressed as bureaucracy. Notice of easement enforcement. Dear Mr. Reddin, we have received multiple complaints regarding livestock contamination of the community drainage channel. Failure to address these issues may result in legal action or additional fines. Ridgemont HOA, Environmental Committee. Jack read it twice, the corners of his mouth barely moving. They were flipping the narrative before he could even speak. They were painting him as the villain. He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a file marked Stage 1, Smear. That night, he called Buck. "You hear anything about complaints against me?" Buck sighed through the receiver. "Yeah, the HOA's stirring dust. They got a PR firm from Dallas now. They'll flood the county feed with their version before you can sneeze." Jack leaned against the porch post. "Then I won't sneeze. I'll plan." Gathering proof, he mounted trail cameras along the new trench, small, infrared, invisible from the road. He marked their coordinates in a notebook. For 3 nights he checked them, found nothing but deer and raccoons. On the 4th night, Luck arrived wearing orange safety vests. 2 HOA maintenance trucks pulled to the side of the access road. "Headlights off!" The men rolled back a hatch and dumped barrels of something thick and gray straight into the pipe. Jack watched through the live feed from his phone. Breath held, heart steady. He captured every second. At dawn, he drove there quietly, scooped soil samples, photographed the tire tracks, and returned home before the workers clocked in. When Sarah asked why he was up so early, he said only, "Good light for photos." By evening, he had video coordinates and contamination readings ready for the next phase. The local paper 3 days later, the Saddle County Chronicle published a 1-page story. Ranch runoff threatens new development. Residents of Ridgemont Estates raise concerns over agricultural pollution seeping into community drainage lines. Jack's name wasn't printed, but everyone knew who they meant. At the feed store, conversation paused when he walked in. 2 neighbors stopped coming by for coffee. Sarah got awkward smiles in the grocery aisle. When Claire visited that weekend, tired from her veterinary rounds, she dropped the paper on the table. "Dad, this is garbage." "You should sue." "I will," he said, voice calm. "But not yet," she frowned. "Why not?" "Because right now they think I'm playing defense. That's the best time to build offense." She stared at him for a moment, recognizing the look in his eyes, the same quiet patience that had terrified rodeo bulls and bureaucrats alike. Then she nodded slowly. "You've got a plan," Jack said. "Always." Iron Creek headquarters. Iron Creek's office sat in a converted grain warehouse 20 miles away. Most people assumed it was just a distribution depot. Inside, 8 employees managed the water supply of 12 towns from screens filled with blue lines and blinking meters. Darnell, the operations manager, looked up from his desk. "Boss, what brings you in person?" Jack dropped a flash drive on the table. "Need you to run something quiet. These coordinates. Check every gallon flow from Ridgemont's main line. Compare to their billing," Darnell typed, data flickering. "Jesus, they're pulling 20% more than reported. At least 18 grand unpaid. Put it on record. Backdate it with meter evidence. Don't send the notice yet." Darnell frowned. "You planning to drop the hammer?" Jack's eyes stayed on the monitors. "Not yet. Let them dig their own hole deeper." The setup 2 weeks passed. The pipeline's hum under the soil became constant background noise, like a heart beating too fast. Grass near the trench turned pale. 1 heifer miscarried. Sarah cried quietly in the barn that night. Jack held her until she stopped shaking. The next morning, he drove to the county environmental office. He handed the clerk his water test results and a formal complaint. "Sir," she said softly, "you know filing this triggers a county investigation. That could get political." Jack nodded. "Good. Let it." As he walked out, rain began again, heavy and cold. He looked up at the ridgeline where Ridgemont's manicured lawns sat above his fields. Water ran downhill. Always had. Always would. He smiled because that simple truth was about to turn into a weapon. Retaliation. By the following Monday, the harassment began. An anonymous online post accused Jack of animal cruelty. Another claimed he'd forged property lines decades ago. One night, someone shot out his mailbox. Sarah wanted to call the sheriff. Jack said no. "They're baiting us. They want headlines of angry rancher attacks HOA." He spent that night checking the cameras instead. Caught nothing. But the next morning, fresh tire prints crossed the mud near his gate. He took pictures. Dated them. Filed them. Every small act was ammunition for later. The unexpected ally out of nowhere. A Ridgemont resident named Martha Klein called him. "I read the Chronicle," she said nervously. "I think you're being framed." "My husband's on the HOA board. They've been hiding test results. Something about nitrate levels." Jack listened carefully. "You willing to share documents?" She hesitated. "If they find out, we'll lose everything." "I'll protect you," he said simply, and meant it. She drove out that night, headlights off until she reached his gate, handed him a manila folder full of meeting minutes, budget reports, and one particularly damning note from Veronica. "Keep this internal. No reason the rancher needs to know runoff limits were exceeded." Jack read it twice, jaw tight. "Thank you, ma'am," she said. "I just want clean water." "So do I." The calm before weeks passed in tense quiet. The fields browned, neighbors whispered. Sarah tried to hold normal life together with small rituals. Pancakes every Sunday, music on the porch. But even she could feel the war humming beneath the silence. One evening, as sunset poured gold through the windows, she asked, "When does it end, Jack?" "When they learn what it feels like to thirst," he said. He wasn't being cruel. He was just telling the truth. The trigger. The county inspector finally came. Clipboard, boots too clean. "I have to check your water discharge points, Mr. Reddin." Jack led him along the creek, showing clear, documented flow. Then he asked casually, "You gonna check Ridgemont's outlet too?" The man hesitated. "Not on my list." Jack handed him a copy of his own data. "Put it on your list." The inspector studied the pages, frowned, and nodded. That was the first domino. The smear backfires. 2 days later, the county lab confirmed elevated contamination in the HOA drainage. The report was public record. Jack didn't leak it. He just let nature take its course. Within 24 hours, the Chronicle retracted their article and printed a correction. HOA construction may be source of creek pollution. Veronica's office flooded with calls. Her PR firm vanished. Half the board turned silent. Jack spent that night on the porch, listening to the crickets and the faint mechanical hum under the earth. He whispered, "Stage 1 done." Then he opened his notebook to the next page. At the top he wrote, "Rate adjustment, Ridgemont, the hook tightens." He drove to Iron Creek again. "Apply Clause 7B, he told Darnell. "Triple their rate for non-compliance. You sure you want to poke the bear?" Jack smiled. "I'm just turning off the honey." Invoices went out that afternoon. Within a week, Ridgemont's board meeting turned into a riot of homeowners furious over water bills. Veronica called him personally, voice ice cold. "Mr. Reddin, there must be a mistake." "No mistake," he said. "Clause 7B. You can't do this." "Sure I can." "You signed it." Click. He left the phone on the table and stared at the creek. A hawk circled overhead, sharp against the pale sky. Everything was unfolding exactly as he'd drawn it. A quiet visit late one night, a car stopped by his gate. "Headlights off." He stepped out with the shotgun resting casual in his hand, not threatening, just tradition. Veronica stepped out of the car, raincoat glistening. "We need to talk," she said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Now you do." She moved closer, her perfume sharp even in the damp air. "You're hurting hundreds of families." "You hurt the land first." She swallowed. "We can compensate." "More money." "It was never about money." "Then what?" Jack looked past her toward the dark ridge where her houses gleamed like teeth. "Respect." She didn't understand. People like her rarely did. She left without another word. Jack watched the taillights fade and whispered to himself, "Next time, don't come asking for what you already owe." Closing montage for part 2. The days that followed blurred into steady work. Iron Creek crews quietly retested pipelines. Buck hinted that county lawyers were sniffing around the permit files. The pressure was building, just not where the HOA expected, and beneath all that, the earth itself seemed restless. Small tremors in the ground where the trench ran, nothing major, but Jack noticed. He marked every vibration, every sound of shifting soil. He had the feeling the pipe wasn't built to last. As he wrote his final notes for the day, thunder rolled across the valley again, low and distant. He looked up and said softly, "Storm's coming." Then he shut the notebook, turned off the barn light. and left the night to the sound of wind and a poisoned creek, trying to remember what clean water used to be. The smear and the storm. The rumors reached him before the rain did. At the diner, conversations stopped when he entered. At church, handshakes turned into nods from a distance. Somewhere between gossip and newsprint, Jack Reddin had been recast as the villain of Saddle County. He didn't fight it. You don't chase every mosquito in a swamp. You drain it. The whisper war it started with a radio ad. A woman's voice, warm, concerned, talked about agricultural waste threatening suburban growth. No names, just enough detail that everyone knew. Then the posters appeared. A photo of the creek, murky and brown under the words, "Protect our families." Sarah tore one down from the grocery window. "They're poisoning us twice," she said. Jack folded the paper and set it aside. Every lie leaves a trail. We'll follow it. He began documenting again, dates, photos, call logs, building a second file marked defamation. The rain breaks a front from the Gulf rolled in that Friday. By evening, lightning raked the sky. The creek swelled fast, carrying mud, twigs, and something slicker. Jack walked the fence line with a flashlight. The beam caught a patch of foam, white and unnatural. He knelt, filled a jar. The smell burned his nose, chlorine and fertilizer. He thought of his father teaching him how to find spring water by taste alone. Now taste meant danger. When the storm finally eased, half his lower pasture was underwater. The pipeline trench cut across it like a wound that refused to heal. The sheriff's visit. 2 days later, a county patrol truck pulled up. Deputy Harlan, polite but uneasy, stepped out. "Morning, Jack. Got a call. Someone reported a chemical leak from your property." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I was about to report the same from theirs." Harlan sighed. "You know how this looks. Just keep things calm." "There's talk of injunctions." Jack's tone stayed even. "I keep things calm. They keep things dirty." He handed the deputy a sealed envelope. "Lab results, time-stamped. File that with your report. It might save you paperwork later." The family under fire Sarah started getting emails from parents at school. Should we send our kids to a class taught by a polluter's wife? She read them once, deleted them, then sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. "I can quit," she said quietly. Jack shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong," Claire called that night from her clinic in Abilene. "They're spreading things online, Dad. Photoshopped shots of dead fish, saying it's your creek. You want me to respond?" "No," he said. "Let them shout. Noise burns itself out." But he didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch with coffee gone cold, watching the stars fade behind low clouds. He thought of how reputations drown faster than rivers. The unexpected press call reporter Elena Cross from the County Gazette called out of the blue. "I've been following your case," she said. "Off record, I think the HOA's hiding something." Jack measured his words. "Off record, I think you're right." They met at dawn by the bridge. She wore boots and carried a recorder wrapped in plastic. "Why me?" he asked. "Because the Chronicle won't touch it, and I like stories with teeth." He gave her access to the non-confidential files, lab results, permits, drone photos. "No accusations, just facts." She promised nothing, but he saw curiosity flare in her eyes, the kind that starts avalanches. The boardroom fire. At Ridgemont's monthly meeting, Veronica faced her own residence. Jack wasn't there, but Martha Klein was. Phone recording in her purse. Later, she sent him the audio. "Homeowner. Our water bills tripled." Veronica. "Temporary adjustment. Corporate issue." Another. "Why's the rancher saying he owns the supplier?" Veronica. "He's bluffing." Crowd murmur, rising. Jack listened to it twice. Every word was tinder, waiting for a spark. Iron Creek moves at headquarters. Darnell handed him the newest audit. "They owe us 36 grand now. And those unreported hydrants? Multiply that by 2. Jack studied the numbers. "Draft the termination notice, but hold it. I want them to feel the pressure first," Darnell chuckled. "You always play chess while they're still learning checkers." "Patience wins wars," Jack said. Sarah's breaking point. That night she snapped. "You think patience will feed us when they ruin our name? You think pride keeps a roof over Claire's head?" Jack set down his coffee. "I think the truth takes time." Maybe too much time. He looked at her, saw the exhaustion under her anger. "I'll fix it," he said softly. She whispered, "Then fix it soon." The storm. Within the next morning, wind tore branches from trees. A full-blown thunderstorm slammed the valley. Lightning hit the ridge twice. Power flickered out. Jack watched from the barn loft as water rushed through the trench like a trapped animal. When the thunder rolled back into silence, a different sound replaced it, metal groaning beneath the soil. The pipeline was shifting. He noted the coordinates, checked the pressure gauges through Iron Creek's system, readings spiking. One bad weld, one surge, and Ridgemont's manicured lawns would become a riverbed. He didn't pray for that, but he didn't stop it either. He just recorded. The Gazette breaks the story a week later. County Gazette ran Elena's piece, HOA pipeline leaking contaminants into Saddle Creek. Independent tests suggest construction flaws and unreported discharges by Ridgemont Estates. County to investigate. The article went viral on local social media. Within hours, news trucks rolled past Jack's gate, dust pluming behind them. He gave no interviews. He didn't need to. The pictures of dead fish spoke louder than he ever could. Veronica's phone lines crashed under public outrage. Homeowners demanded emergency meetings. Iron Creek's customer service logs recorded record calls, everyone complaining to her, not to him. Jack sat by the window with Sarah that night, both silent, rain drumming on the roof. She finally whispered, "It's turning, isn't it?" He nodded. Slow but sure, Veronica strikes back-cornered people lash out. Veronica filed a lawsuit claiming malicious rate manipulation by Iron Creek Water Co. It was meant to scare him, not win. Lucy Fenn, Jack's environmental attorney, laughed when she read it. "Half these claims contradict each other. You want me to crush it now or let it simmer?" "Simmer," Jack said. "I want her spending money on every motion," Lucy smirked. "You're colder than I remembered." "I'm tired," he replied. Flashback interlude. He dreamed that night of his grandfather building the first well, hand pump squealing, water bursting clear. "Protect the source, Jackie," the old man had said. "The day you sell your water, you sell your soul." He woke before dawn, those words still echoing, and knew exactly how to end it. The county hearing. 3 weeks later, a public hearing convened. EPA representatives, county officials, residents. Jack arrived last, hat in hand, boots clean. Veronica sat across the room, makeup perfect, smile brittle. The inspector presented slides, photographs of leaks, lab results, pipe design flaws. Every image tightened the rope around her argument. When asked for comment, she said, "This is a coordinated smear by a disgruntled rancher." Jack stood when the chair recognized him. "Ma'am, the only smear here is the one floating in the creek." "And it's theirs." Murmurs filled the hall. Someone clapped once. Others followed. The chair banged the gavel. "Order! Mr. Reddin, your evidence is on record. The board will deliberate." He tipped his hat and left without another word. Outside, cameras flashed, questions flew. He just said, "Truth doesn't need press releases," and walked to his truck. The crack in the pipe. That night the storm returned, heavier, crueler. Water hammered rooftops, and somewhere under the sod of Ridgemont a weld failed. Residents woke to gurgling drains and lawns bubbling brown water. By morning, the HOA's maintenance line was flooded with complaints. Jack received an alert from Iron Creek's monitoring system. Pressure loss, Sector 9. Ridgemont's line. He smiled. Not with joy, but inevitability. Nature had delivered its verdict. The Fallout news crews filmed residents filling buckets with bottled water. The same anchor who'd once called Jack a polluter now reported possible negligence by HOA contractors. Veronica disappeared from public view. Rumor said she'd flown to Austin to meet lawyers. Sarah watched the coverage, silent. When Jack walked in, she said simply, "You were right." He put an arm around her shoulders. "About what?" "Patience," he nodded. "It's the only thing that doesn't cost interest." The reckoning begins a week later. Lucy Fenn filed Reddin versus Ridgemont Estates, claims of trespass, defamation, and environmental damages. She added a single lethal exhibit, proof that Iron Creek Watercomer owned the HOA's supply lines outright. Veronica hadn't known that when she signed the development contract years ago. Lucy said, "Once the court sees this, they'll realize they built their empire on your ledger." Jack just answered, "Let's give them 30 days to pay for every drop they wasted." The valley turned green again as spring edged in. The creek ran low but clear where the trench hadn't poisoned it. Jack stood on the bank, hat in hand, eyes on the slow current. He whispered to the water, "Almost there, old friend. Just hold on a little longer." Above him, thunder murmured, distant but returning. Cutting the line, the wind carried the smell of metal that night, wet, sharp like the scent of a tool right before it breaks. Jack felt it in his bones long before the noise came. Somewhere under the ridge, steel was straining. He set his coffee aside, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped into the dark. The fence, the gate latch hung twisted, wires snipped clean. Tire tracks carved deep into the mud, heading straight toward the trench. Rufus growled low. "Easy, boy," Jack whispered, raising the light. The beam caught something glinting in the grass, an empty oil can, fresh fingerprints smeared on its side. The same brand he'd seen stacked at the HOA maintenance yard. He took photos, measured footprints with his boot, and followed the trail until the mud grew too slick to walk. In the distance, engines turned over, fading fast toward Ridgemont. Jack stood there in the rain, water running off his hat brim, and muttered, "You just dug your own grave." The breach-by morning, the cut fence made local chatter again. Ranchers' cows loose on golf course. The HOA fined him $500 for livestock at large. He paid it at the courthouse, smiling as he signed the check. Paper trails cut both ways. That afternoon, he visited Buck. "Think they'll try eminent domain next?" Jack asked. Buck scratched his chin. "She's asking for a hearing, claims the pipeline's critical to community safety." Jack chuckled. "Then she better hope it holds," Buck frowned. "You planning something?" Jack shook his head. "Just listening to the ground." The audit at Iron Creek, Darnell dropped a folder thick as a Bible on Jack's desk. 17 unauthorized hydrants, 2 illegal irrigation wells. Everyone tied to Ridgemont. Jack flipped through photos, gleaming chrome caps hidden behind decorative bushes. "That's theft," he said. Darnell nodded. "And felony misuse of municipal supply." Jack slid the folder toward Lucy Fenn. She adjusted her glasses, scanning fast. "You realize what this means?" she asked. "I realize they've been stealing water while accusing me of poisoning it." Lucy leaned back, smiling. "Then let's baptize them in paperwork." The first strike, Lucy filed the notice of intent: trespass, contamination, fraud. Simultaneously, Iron Creek issued a 30-day termination warning for violation of environmental clauses. The document hit Ridgemont's inboxes like a thunderclap. Within hours, Jack's phone buzzed. Veronica herself. "You can't cut our water." "We'll sue." "You already did," Jack said. "This is me replying. Families will suffer." "They already are." "Start fixing the pipe." Click. He left the phone on the table, heart steady. That was the sound of leverage finding its weight. The media turns Alina Cross published another piece. Illegal wells found on HOA property. The photos came straight from Lucy's filings. Public opinion flipped overnight. For the first time, strangers stopped Jack on the street to shake his hand. An old rancher at the feed store said, "Took someone finally to teach those suburb folks respect." Jack just nodded. He wasn't after applause. He was after balance. The flood night. 2 weeks later, the sky split open. 9 inches of rain fell in 12 hours. Lightning shredded the ridge. Jack stayed awake, watching the creek rise and the trench collapse into itself. At 2:07 a.m., a sound rolled through the valley like cannon fire. Then another. 3 rapid booms, metal and water colliding. The pipeline had burst. He grabbed his drone controller, sent the small craft into the storm. On the live feed, geysers of muddy water shooting 30 feet high across Ridgemont's backyards, lawns turned to rivers. Chemical foam spread like snow over the golf course. He recorded every frame. Morning after, by sunrise, county emergency lines were jammed. Ridgemont residents filled buckets with bottled water. News crews filmed chaos. Jack drove the fence line, camera rolling. The pipeline scar now gaped open, half a mile of torn, earth-bleeding gray water. He scooped samples, bagged debris, stored it in coolers. Evidence. Always evidence. Sarah met him at the porch, raincoat dripping. "It's bad up there," she said. "I know. They'll blame you. Let them. I've got the truth bottled." The panic by noon, Ridgemont's clubhouse looked like a war room. Homeowners shouting, board members white-faced. Martha texted him updates. "They're calling emergency plumber." Veronica yelling. "News outside," Jack replied. "Keep recording." That evening, every local station opened with the same headline: "Pipeline failure floods luxury development." Veronica appeared on camera, hair damp, voice trembling. "It was sabotage," she claimed. Someone tampered with the system. Reporters asked for evidence. She had none. Elena Cross aired Jack's drone footage the next hour. The cracked welds, the poor construction, the illegal runoff drains. No commentary, just the truth in high definition. Public opinion sealed itself like fresh concrete. The Court of Water, too. Days later, Lucy filed the main suit in county court. Reddin vs. Ridgemont Estates and Veronica Lane. Claims trespass, contamination, defamation, and criminal negligence. The clerk looked up from the stack of papers. "You sure want all this in one filing?" Lucy grinned. "We're saving the trees by ending this quick." Jack signed the final page. "Make sure it reaches every newsroom in the state." The HOA meeting Veronica called a closed meeting. Half the homeowners showed up anyway, shouting. Martha sat near the back, streaming live on her phone. Resident: "Our insurance won't cover this." Another: "Why's our water shut off?" Veronica: "Temporary outage?" Resident: "The papers say the rancher owns the company." Veronica: "He doesn't." Crowd roar drowns her voice. Jack watched the footage from his living room. Sarah beside him whispered, "Feels over." "Almost," he said. "One last turn." The reveal preparation Lucy and Darnell worked late, compiling every ownership document of Iron Creek, LLC filings, purchase receipts, water right deeds, all with Jack's holding signature. 15 years hidden, now ready to surface. Lucy handed him the folder. "Once you show this, there's no going back." Jack closed it gently. "There's also no need to hide anymore." The revelation day, the courthouse overflowed. Reporters shoulder to shoulder, residents standing in the halls. Jack wore his oldest hat and cleanest boots. Sarah and Claire sat behind him. The judge called the case. Lucy presented photos, lab reports, and finally the ownership documents. "Your Honor," she said, "Ridgemont's water supplier is Iron Creek Water Company. Its sole owner, Mr. Jack Reddin." A hush fell so complete, even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold breath. Veronica's lawyer stammered, "That's impossible. He's a private rancher." Lucy smiled. "A private rancher with foresight." Jack stood. "They poisoned my creek. They stole my water. They forgot who owned the well." The judge tapped his gavel once. "The court recognizes full ownership and authority under contract." The defendant's motions are denied. Reporters surged forward. Flashes burst white. Veronica sank into her chair, face pale as dust. Aftermath by evening, every station carried the clip. "Rancher reveals he owns HOA's water supply." Memes, headlines, interviews. Jack declined them all. He went home to the porch, where Sarah waited with 2 glasses of lemonade. "You won," she said. He looked toward the creek, water moving slow and clean again. Not yet. Winning's keeping it that way. The cleanup over the next month, Iron Creek crews dismantled the broken pipeline under EPA oversight. Topsoil replaced, new grass seeded, fences mended. Ridgemont paid damages and back rates, every cent plus penalties. Lucy handed him the settlement check. 6 figures. Enough to rebuild twice over. Jack tucked it in his coat. "Money's fine. I want a clause too. Land can't be touched again without consent." "Done," she said. The last conversation, Veronica asked for one final meeting. Jack agreed on neutral ground, the county fairgrounds cafe. She looked smaller without the sunglasses, voice quieter. "I lost everything," she said. "You built it on stolen ground. Thought I was doing what's right for the community? Maybe next time start by asking the people who were here before the streetlights." She nodded, tears unguarded. "Do you hate me?" Jack considered. "No. I just don't trust you near a map again." He left a 20 on the table and walked out into sunlight sharp enough to make the world look clean. Epilogue. Water rights. A month later, the Reddin Water Trust opened its first fund, grants for landowners fighting corporate encroachment. Local papers called it poetic justice. Jack just called it balance. At dusk, he stood by the restored creek. Rufus lapped at the water. Cattle grazed peacefully. Sarah joined him, slipped her hand into his. "Think they'll ever learn?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, "if they stay thirsty long enough." The water whispered against the stones, carrying the reflection of clouds that finally looked white again. The aftermath and legacy. The morning after the verdict, the courthouse square was quiet again. Jack Reddin parked his truck by the old oak, watched the janitor hose down the marble steps where cameras had crowded the day before. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. Normal had changed. He tipped his hat to the janitor, then drove home along the county road that cut through pastures still slick from rain. The air carried the faint smell of mud and freedom. At the gate, Sarah waited, hair lifted by wind. She didn't speak. She just smiled that tired smile that meant we made it. Jack stopped, stepped out, and pulled her close. For the first time in months, neither of them had to pretend strength. The creeks returned. 2 weeks later, the EPA crews packed up. Their portable tanks and testing gear left ruts in the soil, but the water ran clear again, cold and sweet as it had when Jack was a boy. He waded ankle-deep, cupped a handful, and tasted it. Clean. Sarah laughed from the bank. "You sure that's sanitary?" He grinned. "I own the company. If it's bad, I'll fire myself." They spent the day pulling old debris from the bend, plastic, rusted pipe shards, even a child's golf ball washed down from Ridgemont. Each piece tossed aside felt like exorcising a ghost. At sunset, Claire arrived with supplies for testing the soil. "University wants data for a case study," she said. Jack ruffled her hair. "Tell them it's a study in patience." Ridgemont. Without a queen across the ridge, Ridgemont had gone strangely quiet. Lawns yellowed under strict water rations. Half the homes were for sale. The clubhouse shutters hung loose, the marble foyer dark. Veronica's replacement tried public apologies, but no one came to meetings anymore. Community, it turned out, didn't survive on press releases. Martha Klein sent Jack occasional updates by text. "They're planting native grass now. HOA budget down 80%. Jack replied only once. "Good. The land remembers better than people." Sarah's peace teaching had become safe again. Parents stopped whispering, the principal apologized. On Fridays, she brought her students to the ranch for field lessons on water cycles. Jack would stand quietly at the back, watching kids toss pebbles into the creek, asking questions that made him hopeful. "Does the water ever stop moving?" "No," he'd answer. "It just keeps finding new paths." At night, when the house went still, Sarah sat beside him on the porch swing. They didn't talk about lawsuits or money. They talked about weather, crops, future grandkids. Every ordinary topic felt like a victory. The fund Lucy Fenn drafted the charter for the Reddin Water Trust. Jack signed the papers at the same courthouse where the fight had begun. Initial funding came from the settlement plus donations from small ranchers who'd watched his story unfold. Its mission? Free legal help and testing kits for landowners dealing with contamination. The first applicant, a farmer from neighboring Briscoe County, visited a week later. "They're running a highway line through my well," he said. Jack listened, nodded, handed him Lucy's card. "Get your water tested before you argue," he advised. "Facts first. Feelings later." The man left repeating the words like a prayer. Claire's clinic, Claire's veterinary practice, opened officially that spring. Reddin Animal Care and Farm Health. Jack built her a sign from reclaimed pipeline wood, sanded smooth and carved by hand. At the opening, half the county came with pets and pies. Even Buck brought his dog and a grin. During the ribbon cutting, reporters asked Jack for a quote. He said, "She's fixing creatures instead of suing people. That's the real progress." The laughter felt good, real, unscripted. Buck's visit one evening. Buck pulled up with 2 beers and a folder. "County's naming the creek a protected watershed," he said. "We're calling it Reddin Run." Jack frowned. "You don't have to—" Buck cut him off. "We want to. Folks need reminders that stubborn can be holy sometimes." They clinked bottles. Buck added, "Veronica pled guilty to falsifying reports. Community service, fine, maybe 6 months suspended." Jack just nodded. "That's enough." "Enough?" Buck asked. "Yeah," Jack said. "The rest's between her and the river." Veronica's shadow, he saw her once more, months later, outside a courthouse in Austin. She looked thinner, hair darker, carrying boxes of paperwork herself instead of assistants. Their eyes met across the parking lot. No anger left, just understanding. She gave a small nod. He returned it. Neither spoke. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to learn the weight of what you took. The dry summer that summer brought drought again. Creeks shrank, wells dipped low, grass browned. But Iron Creek's system held steady. Jack's foresight 15 years earlier had paid off. The new reservoirs he'd approved kept the region supplied while other counties rationed. He spent evenings checking gauges online, satisfied more by numbers than applause. Every gallon accounted for felt like justice repeating itself in silence. The book Elena Cross returned with a proposal. "A publisher wants your story," she said. "Not a tell-all, just what it felt like to stand your ground." Jack laughed. "You sure folks want to read about water tables and courtrooms?" "They want to read about dignity," she replied. He agreed only on one condition. Proceeds to the trust. When the book came out, The Man Who Owned the River, it climbed the local lists. He didn't do a tour. He just signed copies for libraries and schools. The festival a year later, the county held the first Creek Restoration Festival. Kids painted rocks, bands played, Iron Creek set up a clean water exhibit. Jack opened the event with a short speech. "Land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. If you take care of your water, it'll take care of you." The crowd applauded softly, respectful more than loud. Sarah squeezed his hand. Claire's clinic sponsored free checkups for ranch dogs. For once, the valley felt whole. Letters and thanks over months. Letters arrived, handwritten from strangers. A retired miner wrote, "You reminded me to test my well before it was too late." A school teacher from Nevada, "My students studied your case for civics class." Jack kept them in a drawer, unopened for a long time, then one evening read them all at once. He didn't cry, but he came close. Sarah's garden. With court papers gone and time finally hers, Sarah turned the old floodplain into a wildflower garden. She planted milkweed for monarchs, lavender for bees, and named each section after family: Granddad's Bend, Claire's Patch, Rufus's Trail. When the first blooms came, the whole ranch smelled like forgiveness. Jack built her a wooden bench overlooking the creek. On the back he carved, "For the woman who watered me when the world ran dry." A night by the fire, autumn drifted in, crisp and golden. They built a bonfire by the creek. Friends gathered. Buck, Lucy, Darnell, a few neighbors who'd once doubted him. Stories flowed easier now. Lucy toasted, "To the quiet man who turned patience into power." Jack lifted his glass. "To clean water and good company. May both stay clear." Laughter rose with the smoke. Above them, stars stitched the sky back together. Legacy Unfolds Iron Creek expanded cautiously, focusing on conservation instead of profit. Jack insisted on solar pumps, wildlife corridors, local hiring. "Water doesn't need greed," he told the board. "It needs guardians." Claire became one of those guardians, joining Iron Creek as veterinary ecology advisor, blending animal health with land care. Sarah teased. "You've built a family business without trying," Jack replied. "Built it the only way worth building, slow and honest." The next generation, one evening, a group of local high school students visited for interviews. They asked what advice he'd give young people facing unfair power. He thought for a moment, then said, "Never confuse silence with weakness. Sometimes the loudest thing a man can do is wait. The quote ended up painted on a mural at the county school. A creek doesn't shout, but it carves stone. The return of rain 2 years later, rain returned heavy and steady. This time it didn't bring fear. The new runoff systems diverted water safely. The creek swelled clear instead of brown. Jack stood under the porch roof, hat dripping, watching it all flow. Sarah came beside him. Still listening to the ground? Always, he said. It tells me when the story's done. The final reflection. After dinner, when the house settled and crickets started their endless hymn, Jack walked down to the water one last time. The surface reflected the moon, full and unbroken. He saw his own face there, older, lines carved deep by years of fight and forgiveness. He spoke softly to the river. You outlived the lies. That's enough. Behind him, the porch light flicked on. Sarah called, "Come in, it's late." He turned once more to the water and whispered, "Thank you." Then he walked back toward the light. Boots leaving clean prints in damp earth. Epilogue. The flow continues. Some nights. Truckers on Highway 19 still slow down when they pass the ranch. They say you can see the reflection of porch light rippling across the creek like a second sunrise. Locals call it the Reddin glow. No one's sure if it's just the angle of the water or something else, maybe the land. Remembering a man who refused to let it be poisoned, the story travels from diner to classroom to internet feed, changing shapes but keeping one truth intact. That somewhere in Texas, a rancher once proved patience can be stronger than power, and that the cleanest water is the kind that runs through a man's soul before it reaches the earth. Ripples beyond the valley. A phone call from Austin Spring had barely begun when Jack's phone rang at dawn. "Mr. Reddin?" a calm voice asked. "This is Governor's Office, Environmental Affairs Division. We'd like you to testify." Jack rubbed sleep from his eyes. "Testify to what?" "The Rural Water Rights Bill. Your case inspired it." He chuckled softly. "Never thought I'd see the day Austin wanted to hear from a rancher." "People listen when you make headlines without shouting," the man said. Jack agreed to go, on one condition: no TV crews, no fancy introductions. "Just the facts," he said. The Capitol. The hearing room smelled of coffee and carpet glue. Suits everywhere. City people who thought leather boots were a costume. Jack wore his oldest pair, the ones scarred by barbed wire and work. When his turn came, he spoke slow. "Water's like respect. You don't notice it till someone takes it. Give counties the right to protect what keeps them alive." He didn't preach or plead. He just told the story, what it felt like to watch diesel swirl in his creek, how it changed the way his family breathed. When he finished, the room was silent. One senator whispered, "That's the testimony we'll remember." The bill passed committee by afternoon. The documentary 2 months later, Elena Cross returned with a small film crew. "Not for drama," she promised. "For history." They filmed Jack walking fence lines, opening well valves, feeding cattle. He hated cameras but tolerated them for one reason. "Maybe some kid'll see this and learn what patience looks like," he said. When the documentary aired, The Man Who Owned their water, it drew millions of views online. People in cities wrote comments like, "Didn't know ranchers fought like that." Teachers used it in classes about civic courage. Jack never watched it twice. Once was enough to know it was honest. Letters from everywhere. The post office clerk started setting aside a special crate marked Reddin Mail. Letters arrived from Kansas, Maine, even overseas. Farmers, teachers, kids with science projects, all thanking him. Sarah read some aloud at breakfast. "Dear Mr. Reddin, my dad stopped a factory from dumping near our river because of you." Jack smiled, embarrassed. "Tell them I didn't do it alone." "Tell them the creek helped?" Sarah laughed. "Maybe I will." Iron Creek Grows Up, Iron Creek Water Co. wasn't a secret anymore. Under Jack's guidance, it shifted from quiet utility to model of transparency. Monthly reports went public. Engineers started school programs teaching children how water moved through soil. Darnell approached him one day. "You realize we're the benchmark now?" Jack grinned. "Benchmark's just another word for target. Stay humble." They introduced solar-powered pumps and wildlife-safe reservoirs. Other companies copied them, some grudgingly, some with genuine respect. The scholarship Claire suggested starting a scholarship for environmental vet medicine. Half my classmates want to help wildlife but can't afford the specialization, she said. Jack nodded. Then we'll fix that. They funded the first 5 students through the trust. At the ceremony, one young woman told him, "I'll remember what you said. Facts first. Feelings later," he corrected her gently. "And don't forget compassion somewhere between." The neighbor's fire. That summer, lightning struck the Whitaker Ranch west of town. Flames rolled fast. Dry grass burned like paper. Jack grabbed hoses, drove the tanker truck himself. Iron Creek's new high-pressure system saved 3 houses before firefighters arrived. When it was over, Whitaker clapped his shoulder. "Never thought water would be the hero twice." Jack answered, "Water's always the hero. We just get in its way." City Invitations Conference organizers from Dallas and Denver invited him to speak. He turned down most. "I'm no preacher," he told Lucy. "You're a storyteller," she countered. "That's rarer." Finally, he agreed to one event at a university. On stage, under bright lights, he said simply, "If you can't drink from your own land, you don't own it." Students rose in a standing ovation. Later, a young engineer approached him. "Sir, I joined civil planning because of your case." Jack smiled. "Then make sure your blueprints don't bleed." The critics not. Everyone loved the legend. Developers called him obstructionist. Online pundits claimed he exaggerated. Jack didn't respond. Lucy told him, "Silence is your best armor." He nodded. "Creek still runs clear." That's answer enough. The Festival of Names at the next county festival, the main bridge over the creek, was renamed Reddin Crossing. Jack protested, but Buck just winked. Too late. Plaques already cast. During the unveiling, kids released paper boats into the water, each carrying messages. Respect land, save water, be patient. Watching them drift, Jack felt the strangest mix of pride and humility. He whispered, "Float far, little ones." Claire's wedding year later, the ranch filled with guests. Claire married a fellow veterinarian under an arch of wildflowers grown from Sarah's garden. The creek murmured close by, background music older than vows. When the minister said, "Water symbolizes life's flow," Jack couldn't help but smile. Every drop that fell on their hands had once carried his fight. During the toast, he said only, "May your love stay clear and your patience deep." People wiped tears. Sarah squeezed his hand. For the first time in years, the ranch held nothing but joy. A bill becomes law. That autumn, the Rural Water Rights Act passed statewide. It required developer impact assessments, public easements, and local consent before trenching through private wells. Reporters credited the Reddin precedent. Jack laughed when he read the headline. "They'll forget my name in 10 years, but maybe not the law," Buck answered. That's how legacies should work. The museum display. The county museum built a small exhibit, photos of the ranch, a section of cracked pipeline, Jack's old sample jars lined like relics. School children pressed faces to the glass. A sign read, "Evidence becomes history when someone refuses to throw it away." Jack walked through once, hands in pockets, shaking his head. "I'm not history," he muttered. Sarah smiled. "You are when they start dusting your boots." New battles, new voices' calls kept coming to the trust. A woman in Arizona fighting a copper mine, a fisherman in Louisiana suing a refinery. Jack advised, but rarely intervened. "It's their turn," he told Lucy. "They need their own patience." One evening, a video message arrived. Young activists standing by a polluted river chanting, "Protect the source." They'd painted Reddin line on their protest banners. He laughed softly. "Didn't expect my name to rhyme with rebellion." Winter on the ranch snow dusted the fields, a rare sight. Sarah hung lights along the porch. Rufus, old and slower, slept by the stove. Jack wrote holiday cards by hand, each ending with the same line. "Keep your water clean and your word cleaner." He mailed them with satisfaction. Out there, people were guarding their creeks. That was enough. An interview at Dawnalina came back one last time. "For an anniversary piece," she said. 5 years since the pipeline burst. They sat by the creek as morning mist lifted. She asked, "If you could tell your younger self one thing?" Jack thought long. "Don't wait for someone to hand you justice. Dig for it like water in dry ground, she smiled. Perfect ending line, he corrected her gently. Not an ending. Just another bend in the river. Passing it on one evening, he gave Claire a box. Inside, the first lab sample jar, his old notepad, and a copy of the Iron Creek deed. She looked puzzled. You retiring? No, just sharing the map. Every generation should know where the springs are. She hugged him tight. Don't worry, Dad, I'll guard it. He believed her. The old map late that night, Jack unfolded his grandfather's hand-drawn ranch map. Pencil lines faded, rivers marked with little stars. In the corner, a note. Water moves like truth, slow, but it finds everything. He traced it with his finger and whispered, You were right, old man. The town hall a decade after the first trench, Saddle County unveiled a new community center powered by Iron Creek's solar grid. They asked Jack to cut the ribbon. He looked out at the crowd, young faces mostly, and said, I didn't win a war. I just refused to lose my land's respect. If you remember that, you'll never need another hero. Applause rolled like thunder through open doors. Outside, the creek answered with its steady voice. Closing reflection. When night fell, Jack walked alone along the bank. The stars mirrored in the current, infinite and patient. He thought of every battle, every jar of dirty water, every letter from strangers. He felt gratitude, not pride. He spoke aloud. To no one and everyone. All I did was listen. The water replied in ripples, carrying his words downstream toward places he'd never see. He turned toward home, a lantern swinging at his side, and behind him the creek kept whispering the story that would never truly end. The new generation signs of change. The creek had settled into its rhythm again. Spring melt, summer trickle, autumn hush. Jack noticed time by the fences he'd replaced and the trees he'd planted that now shaded his truck when he parked near the barn. The world still phoned him for advice, but he found himself saying, Ask Claire, more often than not. She'd taken to the work with a different kind of fire, measured, technical, restless. Where he saw soil and instinct, she saw data and pattern. Sometimes he worried the numbers might steal the wonder from her, but when he watched her kneel by the water-testing samples, eyes bright as sunlight on a jar, he knew the wonder was safe. Claire's vision, she came to him one evening with a proposal. Dad, Iron Creek should move beyond water. We should monitor land, air, wildlife health, all connected. Jack raised a brow. You want to turn us into the EPA? No, she said, smiling. Into what the EPA should have been. Neighbors protecting neighbors. He let the idea roll around in his mind like a smooth stone. After a long silence, he said, Draw it up. Keep it small first. Rivers teach that expansion without depth is just flooding. Within months, she had pilots running. Drones mapping erosion. Students collecting soil samples, ranchers reporting rainfall through a mobile app she'd coded herself. They called it Project Roots. Mentorship Jack still drove out to meet young ranchers starting their own water fights. He'd sit in kitchens that smelled of coffee and worry, listen to their stories, and end with the same advice. Patience isn't waiting. It's working quiet while everyone else's noise burns out. He noticed how often Claire's name came up in their gratitude letters now. Your daughter called our lab personally. Claire showed us how to test nitrate levels. He'd smile at that. Legacy wasn't a statue. It was echoes finding new mouths. Sarah's retirement. Sarah finished her final school year and came home for good. Her students surprised her with a mural of blue waves and the quote, Water teaches patience. She and Jack turned the old classroom supplies into a tutoring shed for local kids. At night, she graded essays by lantern while Jack tallied rainfall data. Two quiet workers, still building futures from scraps of paper. The new board Iron Creek's board expanded to include scientists, farmers, tribal representatives, and one seat reserved for the next generation. Claire took it reluctantly at first. Dad, these meetings are politics. He chuckled. Then learn their language so you can translate it for the land. She did. Within a year, Iron Creek had the cleanest audit in the state and the first partnership with local tribes for shared water management. Jack attended the signing ceremony, standing at the back, pride hidden behind a stoic nod. Rufus and time. The old shepherd passed one quiet morning under the porch where he'd watched so many storms. Jack buried him near the creek, carved a small marker. He guarded more than cattle. That night, Sarah whispered, "Feels like the last chapter of something." Jack answered, "More like the pause between paragraphs." The storm that didn't win 3 summers later, a hurricane's remnants crawled inland, dumping record rain. Local news predicted catastrophic flooding, but the systems Claire had designed, overflow ponds, smart valves, held. The valley stayed dry. Reporters called it the Reddin effect. Jack just shook his head. That was all her. When he told her that, she smiled. "You built the patience. I just built the pumps." Teaching the teachers, Claire launched workshops for school science teachers, using the ranch as an outdoor lab. Kids in rubber boots measured flow rates and learned words like aquifer and stewardship. Jack liked to wander among them, pretending to check fences, secretly listening to their laughter. One boy shouted, "Mr. Reddin, is this your river?" Jack smiled. "It's yours now." An offer from Washington, a call came from D.C. An environmental council wanted Claire as an advisor. She hesitated. "It's far." Jack told her, "Water travels too, and it always finds its way home." She took the job for a year, promising to return each season. When she left, the ranch felt larger and quieter all at once. Jack's health years of dust and labor began to collect their dues. Doctor visits, mild heart murmurs, talk of slowing down. He obeyed halfway, cut his days shorter, but his thoughts longer. In the evenings, he wrote notes titled "Lessons for Whoever Comes After." They weren't instructions, just stories shaped like advice. "Never sign anything you haven't walked." "A creek remembers lies longer than people." Claire's return. A year later, she came back early. "I missed the smell of real rain," she said. Washington had taught her policy, but she missed consequence, the direct hum of water against soil. She unpacked boxes of reports and awards. Jack ignored them, asked only, "What did you learn that works?" She answered, "That the loudest rooms are usually the thirstiest." He laughed. "Took me 40 years to learn that." Passing the reins at the next Iron Creek board meeting, Jack handed over his proxy vote. "Effective today," he said, "Claire Reddin acts as chief steward." Darnell stood, clapping first. Lucy whispered, "About time." Claire looked stunned. "Dad!" He stopped her. Every river needs new hands on the banks. The Hall of Water months later, a national museum opened an exhibit on modern environmental heroes. Photos of Claire shaking hands with tribal elders filled one wall. At the corner, a smaller frame held a black and white picture of Jack beside the creek. The caption read, "He listened until the water spoke. When he saw it, he muttered, 'Could have picked one where I'm smiling.'" Sarah squeezed his arm. "You are. Just slower." Claire's crisis. Her first test came when a corporation proposed drilling upstream. She fought them in hearings, facing lobbyists twice her age. Jack sat in the gallery, silent, proud. When the final vote denied the permit, she walked straight to him. "Did I do it right?" He said, "You did it your way, and that's better." The letter. He didn't send. That night he wrote her a letter. "Claire, the land will test you. It always does. When you get tired, remember it doesn't need perfection. Just caretakers who stay when others leave." He left it in his desk drawer, never mailed. She found it years later, edges yellow, words still steady. The quiet season winter settled softly. Jack spent mornings by the creek, sketching new projects that he'd never start. Sarah read beside him. Sometimes they'd talk about nothing for hours, comfortable, circular talk like the current itself. The world outside buzzed with progress, but on the ranch time moved by water level and bird song. Peace had become its own kind of noise. Claire's promise one evening, she sat beside him, both watching sunset bleed into the water. She said, "When you're gone, I'll keep it the same." He chuckled. "Don't. Keep it better." Then quieter. "Just make sure no one builds a pipe through it again." She nodded, eyes glistening. "Never." The creek's memory that night rain began, a soft, steady whisper. Jack lay awake listening. Every drop sounded like a memory. All the voices of those who doubted, helped, learned. He thought of his grandfather's map, Sarah's garden, Claire's future. He smiled, closed his eyes, and let the sound carry him. Morning after rain, he was gone by sunrise. Peaceful, still. One hand hanging from the porch chair, fingertips wet from the mist. Sarah found him smiling. The creek behind him ran clear, louder than usual, as if saying goodbye in its own language. Legacy continues at his memorial. People from counties away gathered. No speeches, just stories. Claire read his note aloud. Patience is water's secret name. Then she poured a small jar of creek water into the soil near his grave. Circle closed, she whispered. After everyone left, Sarah stayed behind. She heard the faint gurgle from underground pipes and smiled. Still listening, aren't you? She said to the earth. Epilogue. The next spring months later, Claire stood on the porch holding her newborn son. She whispered, That's the sound of your great-granddad's patience. The baby reached out toward the glittering water. Down by the bank, wildflowers swayed, bluebonnets and milkweed, Rufus's trail thick with life. The creek rolled on, carrying past, present, and promise in one endless current. Part 8. Beyond the Creek. Early light 5 years had passed since the morning the porch fell silent. Claire still rose before sunrise, just as he had. The ranch wore its age gently, barn painted new red, fences lined with dew. When the first light touched the creek, she whispered the same words he used to say, Morning, old friend. Every day began like a small promise kept. The work continues Iron Creek had grown but never swelled. Claire kept its heart small. Regional partnerships, school programs, soil health drives. No headquarters towers, just field labs and pickup trucks. She visited each site herself, boots in the mud, hair tied back under her father's old hat. When reporters asked how she maintained success, she answered, We don't chase growth. We chase clarity. The phrase became a quiet motto, painted on office doors across 3 counties. Letters from the past while clearing the old desk, Claire found a folder marked Maps and Memory. Inside, faded photos, her grandfather's creek sketches, and one more letter in her father's hand. If this finds you, the land's already teaching you better than I could. Keep listening. Don't let progress outshout patience. She folded it carefully, placed it in a waterproof frame, and nailed it beside the lab door where everyone would read it before heading out. Sarah's twilight, Sarah aged with the seasons, tending the wildflower garden, still teaching neighborhood kids to name plants by smell and texture. Some evenings she'd sit with Claire by the porch. Your father worried about leaving too soon, she said once, but he left enough roots for 10 lifetimes. Claire answered, Then we're still growing. Sarah smiled. Exactly. The creek's return, after a long drought, rain finally came, steady, cleansing, filling every hollow. The new runoff ponds brimmed but held. The creek swelled glass clear, carrying petals from Sarah's garden downstream. Claire waded in to measure flow the same way he had years ago. The water was cool, alive, whispering a familiar rhythm. She caught herself speaking aloud. You'd like this season, Dad. The land finally trusts us again. The reply was only wind through the grass, but it was enough. The community on Sundays the valley gathered by the water. Children painted rocks, elders told stories, musicians played soft guitar. Nobody called it a festival anymore. It was just what people did. Ranchers brought samples for testing, and Claire taught them how to check pH with simple strips. It wasn't charity. It was continuity. Someone asked, well, why do we still call it Iron Creek Day? She smiled. Because iron keeps its strength even when it rusts a little. The new tree each spring, the town planted a single pecan sapling near the bend where Jack once stood his ground. The trunk was taller now, leaves broad. Underneath a small plaque read, Jack Reddin. He listened. Visitors left stones, notes, sometimes jars of clean water. Claire never advertised it. The land did that itself. The circle closes one evening. After checking gauges, Claire walked along the bank with her son, now 5, curious and barefoot. He pointed at the reflection of clouds in the current. Mama, is the water talking? she said softly, always. We just have to answer kindly. He knelt, touched the surface, and laughed at the ripples spreading out. She watched the circles widen, merging, fading. That was legacy, not monuments, just motion passed forward. The last letter months later, a journal requested an essay from her, The Future of Water. She wrote it late at night, candle flickering, the creek murmuring outside. My father believed ownership was responsibility, not privilege. We can't own water. We can only earn its trust. Every generation must learn to listen again, because silence is where stewardship begins. When she mailed it, she felt lighter, like setting something free that had been waiting too long. Evening glow years blurred gently. Sarah passed in her sleep one spring morning, buried beside Jack under wildflowers. Claire kept the house quiet, unchanged. 2 rocking chairs facing the creek, both still. Some nights she'd sit between them, closing her eyes, hearing the hum of crickets and distant water. Peace didn't mean absence. It meant everything finally in its right place. Visitors, from time to time, travelers stopped by, students, journalists, wanderers. She'd offer coffee, show them the garden, point to the water. They always asked what lesson the valley taught her. She answered simply, that the loudest victories are the quiet ones. They'd leave hushed, as if stepping out of a church made of grass and time. The map returns one evening. She opened the old family map again. Rivers still clear, ink faded but strong. She added a new line at the edge, thin, winding toward unknown hills. Then she wrote beside it, to be continued. Because even peace, she realized, wasn't an ending. It was permission for the next story to start. The final scene at dusk, she stood on the porch, lantern lit, her son asleep inside. The horizon glowed orange, creek shimmering like molten glass. A pair of herons lifted from the bank, wings silent. Claire whispered, "Keep flowing," and turned for home. Behind her, the water moved on, steady, clear, endless. Epilogue. The Reddin Creek Long. After names fade from memory, the creek still runs through Saddle Valley. Children there grow up hearing stories of patience stronger than power. When droughts come, they don't pray for rain first. They check the soil, mend the fences, share their wells. And every year on the first morning of spring, the valley wakes to sunlight glinting on clean water. Locals call that reflection the Reddin light. No one agrees if it's sunrise or spirit, but everyone agrees it's a promise that good land remembers good people.